We are broadcasting this Tuesday session of the Small Business Boot Camp and Resource Collective, helping every small business to return stronger than ever. We want to start by thanking our community partners. Have been very helpful in putting together these boot camps and these sessions, and we couldn't do it without them. So the Small Business Boot Camp and Resource Collective is designed to help prepare small businesses, focusing on less than 20 employees. However, all businesses are welcome to be on here, to emerge stronger and return stronger than ever from the COVID crisis. It's a statewide initiative supported by the community partners we just showed on the previous page and many others. And it's a daily boot camp. We're going to continue through the end of June. And we also have a key resource collective component to it, with resources provided by many of our community partners. So this week's session today is rebuilding consumer confidence. We had a great session yesterday on business planning to return stronger. We've got 3 more great sessions after today this week, and it's going to be a phenomenal week, so please tune in for those other sessions. Quick updates, if you weren't on the call yesterday for the updates, as of June 6th and as of this morning, there's still over 100 billion remaining in PPP. So if you don't have a PPP loan and you're looking to get one, follow up with your bank, find a different lender if you need to. There still are funds available. And with those funds, has some new rulings that are beneficial that we're going to talk about on next Monday's PPP session as we get more clarification from the SBA, but it's a great opportunity. And again, when you combine the PPP loans and the EIDL loans in advance, got a lot of businesses that have been influenced, and the state has received over $9.5 billion in funding from those loans and advances. So key programs throughout the state that are available through the ACA. We have our small business programs working with SBA and SBDC. SBDC is a great partner of ours that has a small business development centers. Our workforce team is working with employers to crosswalk employees and help them find new employees if needed. And our Arizona MEP, which is the Manufacturing Extension Program or Partnership, is a great program for manufacturers and is one of the top MEP programs in the nation. A reminder about the Arizona Together website that provides additional information and resources for COVID-19 on the state level. And then we have our resource guides, our resources and guides here that will help provide small businesses with some guidance on reopening your business with COVID-19 in mind, ranging from beauty salons to restaurants to retail operations. Links to these resources are available on our website. Additionally, our website is a wealth of information on COVID-19 and business resources, so please check it out. You can find it at azcommerce.com/COVID-19. So today we're honored to have CJ Lewis, co-founder and COO of Jolt, and Bob Gibson, Chief Revenue Officer of Jolt, here to talk about rebuilding consumer confidence in your business. CJ was born and raised here in Arizona, out in Gilbert, and excited to have him back talking to Arizona about how we can, our businesses can rebuild that consumer confidence. We're also grateful to have Bob with us for this and his expertise. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn the time over to them and let them load up their presentation.
Great. Thanks, Rob. And thanks everyone for allowing us to have some time this morning. Today we'll be talking about rebuilding consumer confidence and really how to use technology to create that trust and transparency. So first off, just quick introductions. I'm Bob Gibson. I've been in the industry for a little over 30 years. I've done everything from wash dishes to bus tables, short order cook, to restaurant owner, and in general, consulting into multiple businesses, kind of helping with them to improve their bottom line income and IBT. So a lot of experience around just in general business in all different capacities. And with me today is CJ Lewis, and I'll let CJ give a quick introduction.
Hey everyone, great to be with you. As Rob mentioned, born and raised Gilbert. So it's awesome to get reconnected with the ACA and Local First Arizona and some other groups. And glad we got invited to just help today, and really excited about this topic. Was a Gilbert High School graduate, so as I said in my bio, go Tigers. So just really grateful to be here and excited to present. I've been the co-founder, started with Jolt. It's been about 8 years. And prior to that was a server at a restaurant. And so I've been working in this industry 10 plus years, and Bob and I are grateful to be here.
CJ. Just a little bit about Jolt. Jolt is designed to solve the challenges that business owners face. We have multiple products within the suite. We do time and attendance, we do scheduling, we've got task management, digital food safety, and we work with some of the largest brands, both global and domestic. So a lot of experience in how to be a little more efficient in the space. And it's not just hospitality. We actually work with all brands in all different verticals. So today's topic, just a disclaimer, what we did is basically put together a whole bunch of research, and the data points that we used was a company called Technomics, Data Essentials, Nation's Restaurant News, the International Federation of Bars, Taverns, and RTN, Restaurant Technology Network. And then also multiple webinars from industry experts. What we've done is kind of compiled that. And what I'm going to go over is some of the results we've seen and some predictive analysis of what we think may or may not happen in the future. As always, you know, it's a best guess based upon available data. And it is heavily slanted to hospitality. But one of the things that we see in hospitality, and we've always seen, is that they're the first indicator. When things go bad, they're the first ones that get impacted. When things start to go good, they're the first ones to recover. So it tends to be a really good indicator for the industry as a whole. And some of the lessons learned from hospitality obviously applies to all different verticals in the business community. So if we looked at what's kind of going on today, we're seeing a pretty major shift from fine dining and casual type restaurants to really quick serve. If you look at the balance sheets for in the public filings for Domino's or Papa John's and some of the others, you'll see they've actually done pretty well during this time where most of the industry has really been hurt. So QSR has really started to become a major place for spend. And we're looking at about 62% of the spend today is in quick serve, with another 13 in fast casual. That makes up 75% of the total spend. And it's an indication of what we think might be coming down the road. If we look at the population as a whole and how people feel, where they are from just a confidence standpoint, this is from Data Essentials, but 2/3 of the population in the next 2 months will avoid dining out. So that's a lot of revenue that is just not going to happen. It's going to have a pretty significant impact on folks as we start to reopen the industry. Of those, 75% have identified safety as the primary issue. And I think this is a universal truth. It's not just for hospitality. As folks come back to your places of business, they really need to feel that we've taken the coronavirus seriously. We're providing a safe environment, and we're doing all the little things to make sure that we're reassuring them that it's a safe place to be. We've also see that 52% of the population has identified a lack of notification, a lack of proactive approach to sanitization and precautions taken as a major factor. And one of the things that we really think is an opportunity for folks is to proactively market what you're doing and be proud of the steps you're taking and get that out there for the public as a whole. And what we really believe is that if you do that, your return from your customer base will be that much stronger. Some other items that we're concerned about and that we wanted to point out. The first one really is a major concern, public shaming. We're seeing this kind of across the board where, you know, if you happen to have an employee that's not wearing a mask, specifically like drive-through, that all of a sudden becomes a picture and hits social media, and the next thing you know, you got a publicity issue on your hands. And we're also seeing some places like LA County is publishing a list of restaurants that have had cases. In New York City, they're doing some drone tracking of crowds. There's cell phone tracking going on. And we see that as something that you just have to be cognizant of and have plans in place if that happens to you. Another indication is the drop in immigration. As jobs dry up, the impact on labor costs and the reopening, we think is going to be a factor that folks have to be aware of. Kind of the end of the golden age of restaurants. For folks that kind of follow the trends in that industry, food kind of became an art. And a lot of upscale kind of fine dining places, it was kind of the center part of what they did. The food obviously was good, but it was really the experience that folks were spending money on. Another thing that we're really concerned about, so we point this out, is that as places reopen, and this isn't just restaurants, this is in general, because of limitations on customers and how many folks you can have in your building, you still have fixed operation costs, and sales won't meet that. So there is a chance that we'll see a second wave in kind of the November, December timeframe of folks that try to reopen, couldn't hit their OpEx, and then we'll see some folks not make it through this time. The other thing that we're seeing, and I just to put a caveat on this, we think this is predominantly going to be in major metropolitan cities that have predominantly had these problems prior to. So like a Chicago or New York, et cetera, those New York City, those type of folks we think are going to run into this. And this is really, and we're seeing this in Chicago already. City-based restaurants are closing up shop, moving out. We're seeing a lot of empty spaces, a lot of boarded up buildings. And this will have an effect across the board with other businesses that kind of get that draw. And we think there'll be a major, I don't want to say major, but we'll see a shift in population out of urban centers that'll go back into a little more rural, but predominantly in those cities that already were having those kind of impacts prior to this hitting. We also see a major delivery economy. We think autonomous vehicles are not that far off, but in the short term, it just isn't ready from a technology standpoint. So companies like Instacart, we're hiring 300,000 workers. We're already seeing that in the delivery economy. So we see that accelerating, where we thought prior to there'd be a small trend of increase, but now we're really seeing it increase. And we put this in because, history always repeats itself. And it's a little caveat, but the Sears and Roebuck economy of the 1890s, to a certain extent, is what we're seeing today. That return to ordering, delivery, and both in retail and hospitality. Some other impacts that we think in hospitality, but may be seen in other locations, certification of safety. There's a Safe Serve program in hospitality. We think there'll be some kind of government regulations and additional requirements that are coming. That'll cause folks to have to go through a certification process or some kind of notice that you can put out that says that you passed this and that it's safe to come into your building. One of the unintended consequences of what's happened is the mass layoffs. And when we look at the overall quantity of folks that are unemployed today, bringing people back into the workforce, one of the things that could possibly happen is that you won't return to the same job you had. So onboarding and training are going to be key challenges as you bring people back into the workplace, and how you adjust for that and get productive with those folks as soon as possible is something that we should really be thinking about. And then a big shift is really eating at home, where we were really going to a much more of an eat out society. The trend of home-based eating and kind of a return to, what we saw 10, 20 years ago has already kind of taken hold. And we think that'll continue. So when you're thinking about your businesses and how that'll impact, things that will help with that is something to keep in the back of your mind. How do you provide services and products that facilitate that eat home? Another major trend we're seeing is what's been termed in the industry as a grocerant. These are groceries that during COVID started to do more on restaurant type. They did delivery, curbside, pickup, and it's created a whole second sales channel for groceries. And we've seen this in the C-store as well. We saw it in C-store prior to, where they were doing a lot of co-branding with a Subway or a Dunkin' Donuts or something like that. But we think that's really going to take off. And we're already starting to see that trend in the grocery space. Food that travels is key. As we get more and more into delivery and order in, that type of food is going to be part. And there's certain segments of the industry that really just doesn't travel well. So just in the back of your mind, as you're looking at that, if you're in that space, that's something that's really important. Self-service, buffet style, we're already seeing these go away between C-store, between groceries, the self-service salad bars and that sort of thing have been all kind of closed down for now, and we expect that trend to continue. Ghost kitchens, this has been prior to Corona something that's been growing, but we've really seen a mass increase in ghost kitchens and off-premise with delivery as this is has continued to go on, has been a significant increase. So, empty spaces, if there's any realtors on the call or you have good space for a ghost kitchen to come in, that would be something to really think about as that segment of the market really increases. And then technology. How does technology fit into that? For QSR, around drive-through, how do you get people in and out quicker? And then another unintended consequences is alcohol delivery, where in general, it was forbidden to deliver alcohol as part of delivery. That's changed. And we don't think once you take that genie out of the bottle that you can put it back in. So how you monitor that, how you make sure that you're legally delivering correctly, all that kind of challenges are things that businesses need to think about. And we think also we'll see that with liquor stores. Another thing just to be conscious of is to pay for all that we've been through, potential increases in sales tax, property tax, use fees at both the city, state, and federal level could have the impact of less disposable income and potential lost revenues for folks as you plan. I've already kind of touched upon this, but that increase in digital and delivery and how you use technology to order, we think is going to be, we're going to see a dramatic increase in that and more innovation around that segment of the market. We'll definitely see a spend, and we've already seen it. If you've been tracking the grocery store and C-store, the public companies, you can see, that they're prospering during this time. And supply chain is a biggie too. Where's it coming from? Is it certified safe? How does the food get to where it's going? That'll be an increase conscious of the consumer. Brands that have showed compassion or have been part of the community during this time frame, we think will benefit from that. The ones that haven't could see a negative impact. Again, increased unemployment is going to have an adverse effect on disposable income, which equates into less spend. So just something to be conscious of. And then when folks do come back, and this is restaurants or your establishment, social distancing, washing hands, cleaning surfaces, that really reinstalling that consumer confidence is going to be a key part of what we think the future is going to look like. One of the other things we're seeing, and we're already seeing in the industry today, specifically in the hospitality industry, but we'll see this in others as well, is that the brands that had really strong balance sheets will and are prospering. But the other thing they'll do is they'll actually start picking up and acquiring smaller brands as well. So we expect a lot of M&A in the next 12 to 18 months. And we've actually already started to see that happening at a pace that we didn't think was going to happen as quick, but it's starting to affect the industry. Consumer confidence is key. One of the common themes we've been seeing is trust, transparency, and safety is key brand strategies. So to get ahead of the curve and incorporate that into what you're doing today to proactively market your messaging, we think is a pretty important component. Employee safety is kind of the second thing. So as we talk about this from a consumer standpoint, we do know and understand that the consumer confidence is really important. But for employees to come back to work as well, those same types of assurances that you need to make sure that the consumers have, employees are going to need as well. So as you're thinking about reopening and re-onboarding folks, putting things together to solidify employee safety as well is something that folks should be thinking about. And certainly this is something we're looking at as well now with the displacement of labor. There's a large labor pool of potential employees. So from an ownership standpoint, the ability to upgrade your team and your staff or bring on new employees has never been more of an opportunity. So as you're looking at your individual businesses, don't be afraid to look at who's out there and start recruiting, because some of the folks that have been displaced are incredibly talented. And we believe QSR will dominate, and it's one of the things that we're seeing. And just a couple of quick examples of what we're talking about, specifically around the public shaming. These are two posts that we found. It took us like a minute to find, but this is from April, and anyone else shocked that not everyone in the food industry is required to wear a mask. They named this particular place and then started the public shaming of this particular operator. And the second one is just someone looking for a burger place, but part of looking for that is they wanted to make sure that the place was safe, that they were wearing masks, they had gloves, etc. And we just wanted to really point this out and highlight it, because this is a risk, we think, and something that folks really need to be cognizant of, and make sure that you've got something in place so that first this doesn't happen to you, but if it does, you're able to react to it and proactively show the steps that you take. We also believe that as we come out of red to orange to yellow and green, we're going to see legislation. We'll see it at the county, the state, and then eventually at the federal level. We don't really know what that'll look like, but it'll come. But we've got guidelines that are already out there today. So things that on the restaurant side, that you are wearing masks, you're taking your employees' temperatures, all those things that is required to open during this time frame, and tracking that we think is something that folks really need to be cognizant of and take seriously. And then just a couple of quotes we thought before we'll get into some of the ideas we have on getting consumer confidence. As Bill Gates said, and Bill Gates really has been ahead of this for quite a while. Even if governments lift shelter-in-place orders and businesses reopen their doors, humans have a natural aversion to expose themselves to a disease. And I think we all are experiencing this as, regardless of how you feel about the actions taken, there's a large pushback on folks actually revisiting businesses. And then just two industry experts. Al Paris is a innovator and restaurateur, and his theory is safety is the new hospitality. And then Robert Irvine from Food Network, he was actually on with the Yum Restaurants CTO, and both of them kind of agreed trust, transparency, and technology will be required to get customers back. And with that, I'll turn it over to CJ, and CJ is going to talk about rebuilding confidence.
Thanks, Bob. So what I'd like to accomplish, and at the end of what I have to say, is really answering the questions. What are some of those ideas and practical examples we have for you and recommendations that can really help you build confidence in your customer base? And technology is a big focus, but just overall the theme is trust, transparency, and technology. Just to tee off that last quote Bob shared. And so there's 4 examples, kind of pillars, if you will. The first one is more technology focused. That is going digital with digital checklists. We'll get into wellness checks, menu changes, and then we'll follow up with dashboards and displays. And kind of a disclaimer as well on my side, and just a reminder that although, you know, kind of our expertise and a big of our focus is restaurants and hospitality, since being one of the founders, one of our first customers, in fact, our first customer was a dental office, and the majority of our customer base is small business, people with 20 or less employees. Our founder and CEO was a Baskin-Robbins operator of just a single location, and he had less than 20 employees. So really in our DNA as a company is understanding what it's like to own and operate a small business. And so hopefully what we have to share with you today is not just applicable for restaurants, of course, but also is applicable for any public-facing business. So we'll dive into this. This first one, going digital. There's actually 2 parts to this that I like to highlight. The first one is how going digital builds confidence for business owners and the employees. And kind of the second part is how going digital builds that confidence for the consumer. So on the first part, to really hit this home, I want to share a couple examples of paper, because to date, many of the customers we work with come to us from papers. And before Jolt, we used paper at the Baskin-Robbins. And so paper to date is still the leader in the industry, if you will, when it comes to checklists. And so talking about paper for a second, let me tell you this story. So our founder and CEO, again, as I mentioned, is a Baskin-Robbins owner, and it was New Year's Eve. This was probably 2009, and he's with his family going to a New Year's Eve party. He drops his family off, and he gets a call from an employee saying, "Hey, Josh, because he's a Baskin-Robbins, right? It's ice cream. He's like, the ice cream in the walk-in freezer is coming out soupy." Now, I'm not sure about you, what business you run, but if you're an ice cream owner, the last thing you want to hear is that your ice cream in the walk-in freezer is soupy. And so he drops everything, of course. He drops his family off, and he runs to the business, and he spends the rest of the night with a repairman he doesn't know, and is spending a New Year's Eve with that gentleman fixing the walk-in freezer. Kind of a long story short is that night he lost up to $10,000 worth of inventory. Now, he was using paper, so he went to his paper temp logs, and kind of what was interesting is that employees were doing it correctly. All of the temperatures were recorded in the log, but the challenge was there was no way to proactively communicate to employees, or even him, Josh as an owner, the trends of that temperature. So as the day progressed, the temperature started rising, and it just didn't really proactively notify anyone. And so it was kind of too late. And at that point, the ice cream was soupy. And so kind of my first message is that even when you're using paper correctly, there are downfalls to it, because it's just difficult to proactively notify business owners and employees when things are actually going incorrectly. So the use of paper that day actually cost Josh thousands of dollars in inventory. And Bob talked about, you know, potentially the second wave of businesses closing. If there's a way to help decrease your operating expenses, this is an example of that. And in addition with paper, it's, for those using paper, it's better than not using anything. We'll state that. But as you go back and review, it's very common to see what we're used to calling check lines, where like the first checkbox is checked and there's a line down the page, or even people try to put initials that's difficult to read. So long story short, there's just really little accountability when it comes to using paper, which ultimately leads to a lack of confidence for running the business itself. So for the business owners and employees, our first message is to go digital, because really behind the scenes, what it's doing is increasing accountability. And kind of my tagline is, when you can increase accountability, you increase productivity. and performance. And that increase in productivity and performance leads to increase in confidence with the consumer. Now, what do we mean by increased accountability? It's this line you see here. It's knowing the exact what, when, who, and how behind every single task. And that's possible because it's digital. So that's kind of the first part, is going digital can help increase confidence for business owners and employees. Now, solutions out there, there's tons of different digital solutions. And so our recommendation is that you find one that fits your needs. Now let's talk about the consumer. And I have here 3 examples of how going digital creates consumer confidence. And this first one I have here is QR codes for what we call location verification. So one of the brands we work with is McDonald's. And one of the items they do is called a travel path. They do it every hour. And it's just, as the name implies, they're traveling around the business and doing these checks. And one of the checks was to check the dumpster, which was outside. And they had a struggle of making sure that the employee actually got out to the dumpster itself to check, was it clean, the gates were closed, so on and so forth. And so going digital, you can actually print off QR codes and stick them on various places in your business. And then what has to happen is an employee or a manager has to then take a device, whether it's a tablet or an app, and then in order to complete that task, you have to scan the QR code. So imagine if you're a consumer, and how this builds confidence is you're actually, what's nice is going digital can actually prompt employees to make sure they're completing these tasks by going to the actual location in which they're needing to do it. So whether it's a dumpster example or cleaning various spots of the business, consumers can actually see employees doing these tasks, and that can build confidence. The second one is photos. Going digital, you can take pictures with apps. And our example here is on the right. It's verifying sanitization solutions. Because as a consumer, a question I have is, how do I know if a business is using the right type of sanitization solution? Well, now you can actually prove that. So this first picture here is a sanitizer test strip. And so the question is, well, how do you know if it's the right sanitization solution? It's easy. You take the strip and you dip it into the solution, and then you compare the color of the strip to the cap you see there. And it's kind of like the Goldilocks example is, you don't want too little sanitization solution. You don't want too much. You want it just right? Typically an example is like 200 parts per million. And well, how do you know you have that? You have that with a photo proof right there. Going digital then prompts you to take that photo, and that last picture you see there is just highlighting, you're comparing the strip to the color coding there. So just an example of how taking photos and even displaying them can give confidence to the consumer. And certainly, how do you make sure things don't fall through the cracks? Because no one's perfect. Going digital, you can set up things like notifications, whether through text or emails, to make sure no important task for the business is forgotten. So that's just kind of highlighting in our first example here why going digital can be a great benefit, both in building confidence for the business, but also for the consumer. So Bob, I'll have you on the next slide. Okay, let's talk wellness checks. So this is something that's being talked about a ton. It's when employees start their shift, making sure they're wearing a mask, making sure they're wearing gloves, checking their temperature, making sure there are no symptoms. So whether you go digital or not, this is something you should be doing no matter what, is performing these health checks before an employee starts a shift. And then posting that data either through dashboards of some sort or showcasing in social media. So we actually found this example, which is from Mesa, Arizona, that we wanted to highlight. It's a good old TC Eggington's, and a staple for many families in the Mesa and surrounding cities. But here's their post. And so you can see here just from the picture how the owner is taking temperatures. And then they post here, for the safety of our customers and staff, we are checking all the employees' temperatures when they come in throughout the day. And then it talks about how they're open from 6:30 a.m. to the afternoon, come in for breakfast, brunch, lunch, etc. And so they are staying ahead of the messaging. And Bob kind of alluded to this, the importance of, no matter what it is you are doing, take credit for it, right? Whether it's through signage, whether it's through social media, whether it's through going digital. This is just a very practical example of what TC Eggington has done to showcase to their consumer base how they're building trust. And I've talked to people. In fact, we have many, although we're based out of Utah, hopefully we're not considered traders. We're working with the ACA to, maybe work on getting the headquarters of Jolt down to Arizona. But we have a lot of staff that's actually born and raised Arizona. And they actually know this place. And for them to see this, they actually told me just the confidence that this gives them. And so, again, I hope seeing an example like this is just a quick, easy, low-hanging fruit of messaging to your consumer base and how that can build confidence in the consumer. Our third example here is menus. Again, maybe a little more applicable to restaurants and hospitality, but I think the principle applies. In this case, menus, right? You can go digital by taking QR codes and pasting them on tabletops, at the front of doors. And all that requires is a consumer to use their phone, and whether it's a QR code app of some sort, but they scan that code and up pops a menu, right? And not just menus, you can also have this scan to digital dashboards, which we'll explain here as our fourth item. But so going digital with menus, but again, digital is just one option. Other options include laminating all menus and making sure they are cleaned after every single seating. And other options include printing off simple paper menus for each seating, so it's one-time use. And kind of our last example here is what we call dashboards and displays. If you go digital, which again was our first recommendation, kind of foundation here, is find a solution that also allows you the option to display your results to the consumer, whether it's digital dashboards through tablets, in the drive-through, in dining, online, part of takeout orders. Being able to display your business's cleanliness, your safety, sanitization, your processes you're taking can really develop that and build that consumer confidence. But again, whether you're going digital or not, you can post, in our third bullet point here, posting your business's cleanliness procedures and how often things are sanitized is just a great best practice, right? Taking credit for all that you're doing to build that confidence. Some things that you'd want to highlight potentially, these areas of focus we have here are high touch point sanitization, employee hand washing reminders, symptom and temperature checks, and then personal protective equipment checks. And we gave that example with TC Egginton's prior to this. So this was, this of course is kind of a new concept because of COVID. As I've talked to businesses, they love this concept, right? Being able to post results that and all that you're doing to the consumer, they just love the idea. Now, being practical, it's knowing that businesses are not perfect. It's the fear that, on an off day, airing your dirty laundry, if you will, to the public is not something that, we should feel comfortable doing. And Bob talked about public shaming. It's like, how do you avoid that? And so it's important that as you look at solutions like this, that there's also the option of when things are not going well, you're not displaying that data for the public, but you're internally routing that information to business owners and employees to actually fix. And then in the meantime, you can display, whether it's from the CDC or other best practices that you're doing, marketing material like that to the consumer can be a replacement for your results. But having those types of options are important to think through. Now, just kind of in summary, it's this thought of putting your best foot forward, and got to give credit to Mark Mormons here with the ACA, working with them and preparing for this. He gave a great, just kind of high level a point that I really wanted to highlight here. And this is what he said. He said, many consumers will respond to visual signals that show customers health and safety are a priority. Extra sanitization protocols, contactless delivery options, masked and glove employees, and clear social distancing guidelines can all ease a nervous consumer's mind. And we couldn't agree more with this statement from Mark. And this just kind of embodies this theme of putting your best foot forward. At the end of the day, that is what you can do, is putting your best forward and then showcasing that through social media, whether it's through printing material signage, whether it's through going digital. These are all just recommendations and ideas for you to think through. But at the end of the day, putting your best foot forward is what will ultimately create consumer confidence. And I actually wanted to, I saw this news article. It was actually sent to me from Bob. So a good example of a business putting their best foot forward just to kind of give you another example, this actually came from Colorado. The business is Garbanzo Mediterranean Fresh. They have a few locations in the Colorado area. And this was from the news article I wanted to read to you. It says, when the novel coronavirus pandemic began disrupting supply chain, Garbanzo Mediterranean Fresh realized its brand ethos could be in jeopardy. The restaurant had built its reputation on fresh, never frozen ingredients, but needed to switch to frozen chicken to maintain a steady reserve of poultry. It could have quietly sold the new product without informing diners. Instead, Garbanzo put the news front and center on store signage. Did we have to do that? No, said Devin Handler, who's the VP of Marketing at Garbanzo. But as a brand, I feel it's critical to let folks know anything that may or may not have changed with their favorite food. We want to be able to sleep at night knowing that we're being as transparent and collaborative as possible. Business messaging and marketing should evolve this way to make customers aware of how operations have changed during the pandemic and what reopening will entail. Businesses need to remember that the principle by which they need to guide themselves in any tactic that they might employ is trust, customer trust. So I love this just kind of as a conclusion is, we've given you some ideas that we've seen in the industry, some of our own ideas with businesses, but at the end of the day, whatever principle or tactic you want to employ, it is all about asking yourself, how is this going to build trust with the consumer? And just this last week, we were part of NRN's, which is the Nation Restaurant News. They did a 4-day virtual summit, and we had the opportunity to speak at that. And one of the other speakers was GJ Hart. The session he was a part of was more high-level leadership at this time, this pandemic. And I love his quote here. He said, I think it's super important to have a clear vision, a mission and value statements that define the purpose of the organization. So at the end of the day, what is it that your business stands for? What's the vision you have as a business? What are your mission and values? And align your employees to that, and then align your consumers to that, and take credit for that through proactive messaging that we've gone through today. These are just as a bonus recommended leadership books, kind of in line with GJ Hart. The Advantage is a favorite of mine and something that we use at our company. It's all about creating organizational health. And so when you think about, well, how do I actually find a vision and mission and values and align my company to that and our consumers? This book will give you some great tactical examples of how to do that. Some other good reads are Good to Great by Jim Collins, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, and Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. So that's our messaging today. And thanks for tuning in and being part of the session. And glad we had this opportunity to share some ideas, and hopefully it's helpful to you in your business. And we look forward to helping in any way we can.
Excellent, CJ and Bob. Thank you very much for your presentation. To all the people on the call, what questions do you guys have for CJ and Bob? Thinking about technology in this, what would be some of the pitfalls that of not using, not developing or leveraging some of the digital technologies that are available in the marketplace to build consumer confidence?
So I think one of the first one is you then end up being in a reactionary mode, and that can be a scary thing if you're not taking this proactively and putting things in place to be ready. Then it's an opportunity for you to be in a situation where you're just not ready to respond. So even at a minimum, if you're not taking advantage of any kind of digital, you should really think about putting together an action plan for a what if. What if a consumer comes in or a consumer calls me out? How do I handle it? And those type of contingency plans, you'll see. I worked for Oracle for 5 years, Micros for 20. I was part of the Hyatt team. There was always contingency plans in place for anything that could be construed as something that could have a negative impact. PCI compliance was a big one back in the day if you got breached. So putting those things together to make sure that you're ready to action and proactively respond is a pretty important thing.
In the presentation, you guys talked a lot about the restaurants and the restaurant industry. How can the digital technology help consumer confidence in the retail world?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of our hotspots right now is actually car washes, and the digital dashboard that CJ showed. Folks are actually displaying what they're doing, and we think that applies kind of across the board. Any kind of retail or customer journey that involves a person-to-person interaction, you can really leverage this to do the same thing. And I think when you have that set up, and we're seeing this across the board, right? So if you think about you going in for a haircut, and you see the line to go in for the haircut, right? If you're displaying kind of some of this data, it helps people waiting in line to get there to stay and feel that much more confident. So I think whether it's digital or you just have a digital menu board or a digital screen that you're displaying your website or any content you have, I think just displaying that and getting the consumer to feel comfortable is just something to think about.
I might add to that, we gave the example of TC Eggington's, and that was a restaurant, but, we're talking to all sorts of businesses. I mean, I mentioned our first customer was the dental office, and we work with doggy daycare centers, family fun entertainment centers. It's the list, there's this phrase called deskless operations. Really, Jolt can be tailored to any sort of deskless operation. So if you have 1 employee to 20 employees or even more than that, the TC Eggington's example applies to everyone. Every single business should be taking and going through those wellness checks, right? Taking temperatures, making sure employees don't have symptoms. And that type of list can be done manually, but also that can be done digitally. So that's just one easy example of like how you can use digital in any sort of business, because as long as you have at least 1 employee, you should be doing things like that.
And Rob, just to add one more thing, if you think about your business and what's coming, and from a regulation standpoint, any kind of digital solution that you have that is able to quickly adopt that and then put it into play, we think is always also going to be something important. So just as you're thinking through, having that tool at your disposal could be a very important thing.
Okay, any other questions out there? Mark, you got any questions for CJ or Bob?
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'm wondering kind of what you're seeing, Bob, with all that data that you gave at the beginning of the session. As the rest of the country opens up, we're seeing kind of an economic bounce back. Are those what trends are you seeing kind of for the future around some of these digital dashboards? Is this a trend? Is safety kind of until there's a vaccine, or do you think that this is going to be a much longer term kind of consumer ask for places where they're frequenting?
Yeah, great question. I think the trend we saw going into this was heading that way. We've seen major brands like McDonald's is a good example for us, where the digital food safety and the proactive approach became an initiative. And for them, that was about 1.5 years ago, they kicked that off. And surprisingly enough, it went full steam in before this happened. But we're seeing like those type of brands were already kind of on the forefront. And I think just from my experience, the lag for the rest of the industry is usually 12 to 18 months behind. But I think the difference here is what the coronavirus has done is it's expedited the rest of the industry to kind of catch up. So if you look at the major brands and where they're heading, typically the rest of the industry goes that way. So we do think that it's something that is going to be felt in the industry as a whole. I'll also say, just in general, the trends I talked about are really going to be more impactful in some of the major cities that have already kind of was on the bubble anyway. So if you look at a Chicago, you look at a New York City, look at New Jersey, some of the specific states and cities are going to be much more impacted than the rest of the country. Just something to keep in the back of your mind, just because it appears that it could be an impact, I think if you look at Arizona, you look at Phoenix, I don't think you're going to see that same kind of trend because it's just a different environment.
Thanks. And another question that we've had come up, and as we've talked to marketers and things like that, is this idea of kind of performative safety. And so I'm just wondering how you guys kind of think about, or where you draw the distinction between implementing safety practices that are going to make people feel safe versus kind of putting on a show that it can be a turnoff for customers of like, we get it, or you're just doing this to kind of give the illusion of safety.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a really hard, fine line. We think there's some systemic changes that'll be permanent, like washing hands, like sanitization, and reflection of cleanliness within an establishment, how your bathroom looks, how your dumpster area looks. We think those will be systemic. We think the showy stuff, and we've seen a couple of brands actually try to do that in some national ad campaigns that were pulled pretty quickly for that very reason. But we think the underlying fundamentals that make a business successful are the ones that'll survive, right? And we all know what that is. If you're pulling up to an establishment and, you know, the dumpster's overflowing and, you know, you can tell no one's picked up the parking lot for, you know, 2 weeks, you're not as likely to go in as you are if it has that appearance. So we think really fundamentally, it's the same things that make a business successful. The only difference is you're just announcing it. And you're proactively letting the consumer see that you are taking those steps. And that's why your establishment does look the way it does.
Yeah, Mark, my thought on that, and love that question, because it's almost like the psychology of things, like really getting into the mind of the business and also the mind of the consumer, that balance of how do I know if what I'm doing is actually building trust versus coming off as fake or disingenuous. And so it's like, well, okay, so how do you answer that question? And I think it's a question of motive. It's like, what is the business's motive in displaying whatever the safety precautions or steps or processes are? You know, why are they doing that? Is it more for show, or do they actually believe it as a business? Because I think that motive is felt. You know, we're all humans, and there's that human element, that human connection. I think consumers can feel, right? Whether you call it BS radar, it's they know when you're being real or not. And that goes to kind of that bonus slide we had of GJ Hart was talking about culture and the vision and the mission and the values of the company. It's super important to identify what those are. It's like, what do you want your business to represent? What do you want it to be? What are the missions and values, right? What is it you're trying to accomplish as a business? And then you tailor everything you're doing, all your processes, whether it's the safety, whether it's the dashboards we're talking about, no matter what it is, those need to be tied to your mission as a company. And if they are, my experience has been that that is genuine, that is real, that motive, I think, is what will build trust. If you do things that are outside your mission and vision and values, I think that's when it can come across and actually feel fake. So I don't know if that addresses that question, but those are just some thoughts that came to my mind.
No, that's helpful. Another thing that kind of comes to my mind is we talked, this session is about consumer confidence. It's about, like we talked about at the beginning with these stats, making sure that customers feel comfortable returning to restaurants, returning to retail. Do you think that any of these practices, what's the overlap in kind of employee confidence? Do any of these kind of either dashboards, technologies, processes, how does that impact making employees feel confident in working in a safe environment? Can it be used for both sides of that market?
Yeah, definitely. And it's really interesting because when we first started talking about that with our customers, it was almost a 50-50 split between folks that were thinking about it proactively for consumers, but the others were really much more interested in internal for their employees coming back. So we have seen some folks put a flat screen TV up in the establishment with those stats for the employees themselves, because that same fear factor of consumers also is causing employees to second guess coming back to work as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey guys, Andy here. Hey Mark.
Yep, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I was just wondering if I could ask if the team could elaborate on kind of policy-driven decisions to monitor this versus kind of self-monitoring of businesses? And then what's the interplay of consumer verification or feedback on that?
So from the policy standpoint, I think what we're seeing depends on the sophistication of the customer we're dealing with. Some companies have very strict policies, and certainly when we're taking data on employees, they're very conscious of HIPAA and some other regulations. So we've had a couple of folks look at how they do it without actually tracking the individual employee because they're nervous about kind of HIPAA. We have other customers that just are smaller in nature and are more flexible and fluid, and they're not as concerned about some of those concerns. So we kind of see the whole gamut. We also have brands that recognize no matter what they do, and these are some of the large ones. I won't name the actual name of the customers, but no matter what they do, they're not going to get a positive public response on social media. It's just the nature of the beast, right? Whatever they do, someone's going to say something negative about it. So in that case, what they're doing is using this to reemphasize their internal policies around digital food safety or cleanliness or task management. And then they're reporting on that from kind of an enterprise standpoint. So they can see it and build it into their kind of daily routines. And then they get view of it from, say a CEO or CFO type level.
Excellent. We are approaching that time. We appreciate CJ's and Bob's words. If you could give one last comment, CJ and Bob, to share with the group before we wrap up, just your closing thoughts, that'd be awesome.
Sure, I'll go first, CJ, and turn it over to you. First, just really thank you for the time and the questions. We really appreciate it. Certainly, we're learning just as much as everybody else during this process, and we continue to kind of make sure that we take in the data and the info, and then we come back with something that reflects what's going on in the society as a whole, as well as in our product mix. But just wanted to thank everyone for their time and really appreciate the opportunity. Rob, Mark, and Andy, and looking forward to further conversations.
Yeah, and just a big thank you to the ACA, Rob, Mark, Andy, great to work with, and other groups in Arizona. I've got a lot of Arizona pride, right, being born and raised Gilbert, and really care about the state and the community. My dad instilled, he was the mayor for 8 years, the former mayor of Gilbert, and he really instilled in my DNA and my belief system the importance of small business and taking care of local businesses and cities and the state and whole. So just really I'm glad we had this opportunity to share some ideas. And I'll just end with what I did, and that is the importance of just putting your best foot forward. I think we can fear making mistakes, but as long as you're genuine in your mission and vision as a business, and you put your best foot forward that's in line with that, I think I'm a big believer in that things will work out. So thanks again, and hope to talk to and help in any way we can.
All right. Thank you, CJ. Thank you, Bob. We appreciate you guys being on today and sharing this with us. Again, tomorrow we have our next session, 9 a.m. We look forward to seeing everybody there, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks all.